Going to wait just a couple more seconds for everyone to have a chance to get on. Good morning. I'm Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Again, Rob Bonta here, California Attorney General. I'm very, very proud and honored to be joined here by a number of my colleagues, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, New York Attorney General Letitia James, and New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin. We're also joined by three incredible advocates that you'll hear from: Crystal Fitzsimmons from Food Research and Action Center, Rachel Sabella from No Kid Hungry, and Jilly Stevens from City Harvest. And we are here today to announce a motion for a temporary restraining order we filed in our case challenging the U.S. Department of Agriculture's unlawful attempt to withhold Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program funding, SNAP funding, from more than 41 million Americans. The whiplash the President and USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins have given Americans in recent weeks, the steps they've taken to prevent vulnerable families from putting food on the table, are unnecessary, unconscionable, and unlawful. We refuse to stand by and allow it to continue without a fight. We'll be in court today to make our case against USDA's order that we undo steps we've taken to provide full SNAP benefits, steps states took in accordance with a court order and USDA's earlier guidance. While Americans go hungry, USDA is trying to intimidate states out of doing everything we can to get Americans the food they need. Before I get into the details of this TRO motion, I want to recognize that we wouldn't be able to take on this fight without the hard work and dedication of our incredible teams at California DOJ. That includes the government law section and the special litigation section, who have been working overtime to make sure hungry Americans get fed. I want to acknowledge that since late October, there's been a tremendous amount of confusion and chaos surrounding SNAP and whether benefits would be issued in November. Confusion and chaos concocted by the Trump administration. Let me begin with a brief refresher. Upon learning that President Trump and his USDA were planning to needlessly and unlawfully suspend SNAP and withhold food assistance from more than 41 million Americans come November 1st, our coalition of attorneys general sued the federal administration, as did a group of cities, nonprofits, and advocacy groups. Our case, the state's case, was filed in Massachusetts. The cities and nonprofits filed their case in Rhode Island. On October 31st, both courts found the SNAP suspension was unlawful and that USDA must use, at a minimum, the more than $5 billion in SNAP contingency funds available to pay for the benefits. USDA has access to more than $20 billion in another account that it could use to fully fund the program for November. It refused to touch those dollars. Instead, USDA took that court order and decided to only provide partial SNAP benefits, decided to only partially provide food that hungry Americans needed. It provided states with new and complex benefit calculation tables that made it extremely difficult to pay those partial benefits and impossible to pay them quickly, further delaying the SNAP benefits tens of millions of Americans rely on to eat. We can't forget that all the while USDA could have chosen to pay the benefits in full. It has the money to do so. It chose not to. On Thursday, November 6th, the Rhode Island court found that the federal government had failed to comply with the earlier court order because the USDA's partial benefits plan was unworkable. It would have taken weeks or months for millions of Americans to receive any benefits. The court ordered USDA to make full SNAP payments available by the next day. On Friday, November 7th, Trump's USDA filed an emergency motion for both an administrative stay and a stay pending appeal with the First Circuit Court of Appeals, so it wouldn't have to issue SNAP payments and help hungry families. The First Circuit denied the administrative stay. That same day, the USDA provided states with guidance that explained it was taking steps to comply with the court order and working to make full benefits available. After that, the federal government asked the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene. So I want to be really clear about what that means. The Trump administration went running to the highest court in the nation for permission to withhold food assistance for hungry Americans. Late Friday night, the Supreme Court entered an administrative stay to allow the First Circuit to finish its work resolving the government's motion. By that time, relying on both the Rhode Island court's order and USDA's own guidance, many states, including California, promptly began doing their part to make sure benefits flowed promptly to the people who need them. As of Saturday night, new guidance from USDA claimed that the steps we've taken to follow its earlier guidance and the court order were unauthorized, and that we must immediately undo the actions or we'd face steep penalties. In short, they directed states to claw back food assistance that's already gone to hungry Americans who've been waiting for it, counting on it to feed themselves and their loved ones. Then just late last night, the First Circuit rejected USDA's request for a stay or a pause of the Rhode Island order requiring full payment of SNAP benefits pending appeal. Rhode Island court's order still remains paused by the Supreme Court's administrative stay for the next roughly 36 hours. After that, the order requiring full payment of benefits will take effect unless USDA goes back to the Supreme Court and obtains yet another stay. Also, just this morning, breaking, the District Court of Massachusetts paused USDA's November 8 guidance that directs states to undo actions to pay SNAP benefits until further notice. Whew, that's a lot. So if any of that back and forth left you with whiplash, you are not alone. Between November 3rd and November 8th, USDA issued formal guidance 4 distinct times, each providing our states with new directives that were contrary to its earlier guidance. Those contradictory messages underscore that USDA's actions have been arbitrary, they've been capricious, and it demonstrates why we need the court to step in to provide clarity and concrete guidance. USDA doesn't have the right to force us to undo actions we took based on its own direction and a court order. USDA never told us not to take the reasonable steps we took to do our part to make sure benefits flow to people who need them promptly. Now they're saying those same steps were somehow unauthorized. USDA doesn't have the authority to penalize us in these circumstances. It can't threaten to withhold the federal government's share of administrative or threaten to hold states liable for any purported overissuances of benefits resulting from its vague and contradictory orders. USDA is demanding we claw back benefits from vulnerable Americans and instead implement a partial payment system which could take months to iron out, meaning it would be months before SNAP recipients see a dime, before they see the food that they are waiting for. In the meantime, USDA has given no direction on how we're supposed to take the benefits back from those that receive them. Worst of all, USDA has said nothing of the fact that we're talking about real people, real families, seniors, and individuals with disabilities who rely on this funding to eat. Vulnerable individuals who'd face devastating consequences as a result of USDA's unreasonable and half-baked direction, who'd bear the burden of any attempt to claw the money back. USDA hasn't acknowledged the abrupt about-face it did on Saturday night. It hasn't explained the 180 it did on its earlier position. The list of harms USDA's pattern of vague and contradictory guidance is growing by the day. USDA has inflicted severe operational challenges on our states. It's damaged public trust in SNAP and the state agencies that manage it, and it's put more than 41 million Americans at risk of going hungry this month. It's humane and it's illegal, and my colleagues and I won't stop fighting until it stops. We're asking the court to block Saturday night's guidance and immediately make full SNAP benefits available. Americans shouldn't have to wait one day more. The American people deserve better. We deserve a federal government that upholds our laws and serves our people, that puts people over political games, that recognizes that families, seniors, and individuals with disabilities are waiting for the support they rely on, that they've been promised, and they're owed to buy groceries and put food on the table. I don't care where your political leanings lie. Every American should be outraged that the billionaire sitting in the White House would go to such extreme lengths, expend this much energy to prevent hungry Americans from getting food. USDA has the funds to pay SNAP benefits this month. They have the funds to ensure that people who need this money can get it to buy groceries. This administration is choosing to withhold it. Trump is choosing to fight tooth and nail to let Americans go hungry. Before I turn it over to others on this press conference to speak and then open it up to questions. I want to thank the individuals on my team who've worked late nights and through the weekends tracking this evolving case and fighting for Californians who are counting on SNAP. True public servants: Maria Buxton, Liam O'Connor, Sebastian Brady, Paul Stein, Dan Sheehan, Helen Hong. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my great colleague, Minnesota AG Keith Ellison.
Rob, let me say thank you for that. I couldn't agree with you more, and we could probably stop right there, but there are some things I want to share. Mostly, I'm so proud of the attorneys general's team and the other advocates who have fought in the courts and in the community to get food to hungry people. If there was one through line here, it is that Donald Trump and his administration have been fighting tooth and nail not to feed hungry Americans. That is the one thing, despite all of this political tennis match that we're going to be describing, that is clear. The Trump administration has had many opportunities to do the right thing, to feed people in need, and time again, they make the deliberate choice not to do so. These are our veterans, seniors, families. There are people who need our assistance as their fellow Americans, and the Trump administration apparently wants them to go hungry, perhaps because he believes that they are a bargaining chip in his shutdown conflict that these hungry folks have nothing to do with. We do know that Donald Trump spent the weekend not negotiating how to get food to hungry families, but golfing. All 42 million Americans were at risk, and the president is not trying to figure out how to solve this problem. He's got other priorities. It feels like whiplash. I think that's quite a good term to use, because Trump's refusal to step up and solve the problem has created a back and forth of lawsuits and court rulings that we have been all attentive to and involved with. But from the standpoint of the public, it's important to just know that as soon as court rulings forced the USDA to resume paying full SNAP benefits on Friday, the very next day, USDA changed course and ordered states to halt paying those benefits and claw back those funds, which was particularly shocking to me as this matter went forward. Trump's Ag department, has essentially been trying to force Minnesota to take food from the table of hungry families. Minnesota refused to do that, and Minnesota is standing firm with other AGs and advocates to stop Trump from threatening to retaliate against Minnesota. Fortunately, this morning, courts have blocked USDA's order commanding states to claw back those SNAP benefits. So where do things stand? Things stand that SNAP recipients in Minnesota are receiving full benefits at the moment. Those payments have fortunately gone out, which I'm very happy to tell you. I can tell you that my wife and I spent days at Second Harvest, which is operating in Minnesota to help meet the needs of hungry families. And advocates and families alike are telling us that this battle is happening at a time when food prices are up, when insurance premiums are going up, when rent is high, housing prices are high, and with a president who promised to lower costs. All while this is unfolding. So I just want to say that I remain optimistic and committed. As General Bonta said, we will be standing right next to our 42 million Americans, standing up for what's right, which is to feed the hungry. I just say it's a sad day when the President of the United States Ag Department is willing to do anything he can to deny people food, but those same people can bet that we'll stand there to get it to them. So I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, AG Ellison. And also I want to thank Attorney General from California, Rob Bonta. And also in their absence, I want to recognize Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General of Massachusetts, and the Attorney General of Arizona, Chris Mays. My name is Letitia James, and I represent the great state of New York. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today as we continue to fight on behalf of the tens of millions of Americans who rely on SNAP. We are fighting for their dignity. We are fighting for their survival. We know what we are fighting for, and we are crystal clear on what we are fighting against. We are standing shoulder to shoulder against the federal government's callous and repugnant cruelty. Democratic attorneys general have been working around the clock to ensure that all Americans have access to food stamps. We filed this new TRO motion last night in response to days of chaos and confusion in Washington, because apparently our federal government will stop at nothing to deny Americans their food benefits. And this morning, the court ruled in our favor yet again. And later in this afternoon, we will be in court to continue this fight. Since Friday evening, the federal government has been fighting with equal parts desperation and animus to prevent Americans from using their benefits, despite a favorable ruling from the district court. It should shock the conscience of everyone in our country that the federal government would willfully and indeed aggressively fight to keep food off of our tables, food away from children and babies and veterans and senior citizens and the disabled. It is shocking and disgusting. It is all the more galling when you consider that the federal government may reopen soon. What was the point of the federal government's cruelty this weekend? Why subject people to prolonged anxiety and fear? And it is not an abstraction. Real people are hurting. They are hungry. They are facing impossibly difficult decisions to take care of one of our most basic human necessities, the need to eat. I was at a soup kitchen in Flatbush last week, meeting with individuals like Debbie Banner, a mother of 8, who told me she can't even set foot in a supermarket right now. With her benefits cut, she simply cannot stretch what she has to feed her children. Or take Ali McKinnon, who was also receiving meals in Flatbush at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He fears chaos at soup kitchen lines as they grow longer and families grow more desperate. I also met Raymond Cuevas, a truck driver from the Bronx. And after a cancer diagnosis forced him off the job, he's been holding on to his strength and life with SNAP and praying on his knees. And now he has no choice but to go back to work just to keep food on the table. Raymond says he worries most about the families with the children who are being pushed to impossible choices. But in the middle of all of this confusion, I want to make one thing clear. The balances on consumers' EBT cards must be accepted by SNAP retailers. And on Friday, we heard that some grocery stores in New York are refusing to allow shoppers to use SNAP benefits in their stores. As soon as we heard these news, my office immediately sent cease and desist letters to grocery stores that reportedly engaged in this illegal behavior. And we put out a consumer alert, letting New Yorkers know that this denial was unlawful and telling them how to respond. As New Yorkers begin to receive their full November benefits this week, I fear we could begin to see more of this illegal denial to honor SNAP benefits. So I want all SNAP retailers in New York and nationwide to know the chaos at the federal level does not change your responsibility to your customers. You do not have the right to suddenly stop accepting EBT. And if anyone in New York is unjustly turned away, I'm asking them to report it to my office. Let my office deal with the federal government. If you have your benefits, use them. And if anyone tries to turn you away, I want to know about it as soon as possible. My office, in coordination with state attorneys general and governors from across the country, will continue to pursue every legal pathway to ensure that families get the benefits that they are entitled to and that you are respected. Food assistance is not a political issue. It's not Democrat, Republican, or independent. It is a moral imperative. And no one should go hungry because their own government is refusing to feed them. I also want to thank members of my team who have done an amazing job working around the clock. Jennifer Levy, my first deputy, Rabia Mukwadem, who is part of our federal initiatives, Molly Thompson Jensen, and Mark Ladove. And now, without any further delay, I also like to introduce my good friend and my fellow Attorney General from New Jersey, Attorney General Matt Platkin.
Thank you to Attorney General James, as well as Attorneys General Bonta and Ellison for hosting this. And I want to also give a huge thank you to Attorney General Campbell, Attorney General Mays, and frankly, every Attorney General in our coalition who themselves and their teams for the last year, but certainly for the last 96 hours or so, have worked around the clock, quite literally, to make sure that these unlawful, unconstitutional, and frankly heinous acts by the federal government depriving Americans of food wouldn't stand. Now, you've already heard from several of my colleagues about the back and forth. I've never seen anything like this. If arbitrary and capricious, which is the legal standard, means anything, it certainly means that on Friday, the federal government can't tell you to give Americans food assistance, and then on Saturday say, unless you revoke that same assistance that yesterday we told you you could give, we're going to punish you to the fullest extent of the law and not tell you even what those punishments are. That is what we're dealing with. 42 million Americans are on SNAP. And let's not get lost in an acronym. SNAP ensures people have food on the table. In my state, it's 850,000 New Jerseyans, 350,000 children, almost 200,000 seniors. There are more children in New Jersey on SNAP than consist of the entire population of our state's largest city. That is how big of a deal we're talking about. 1 in 8 Americans. And yet this government chose to use the full power of the most powerful government in the history of the world to say, not only first, we're going to use our full legal might to stop payments they could lawfully make to give people food, but then once they told us in writing to give these people food, that we would have to revoke it from them. So the scenario that they want to see happen is that a mother or a father goes to the grocery store today based on the guidance that we all gave them following the order from the federal government that they can use their EBT cards to purchase food for their children. They want them to fill up their supermarket baskets, get to the checkout counter, already worried about whether they can afford everything in that basket given the price of those goods, have them swipe that card and have it not work. That is what that letter on Saturday night would have done, if it were even technically capable of doing it. I never imagined in my life I would have to use the education and training I have as a lawyer to prevent my government, the government that I pay taxes to prevent it from starving American citizens. And yet here we are. And so I don't have much more to say about the law. You've heard it. We're right. Every court that has looked at it has agreed with us we're right. But I also don't understand, as a lawyer, as a public servant, as somebody who follows my faith, as a human being, how there are people in the highest offices of this country, and frankly, that there are public servants who swore oaths to serve the millions of Americans who pay their salaries, that they would use that privilege to starve them. Just as recently as an hour ago, even as the supposed shutdown deal, as ridiculous as that is apparently coming together, this administration is still going to the Supreme Court to fight for the right to starve Americans. I don't know what to say about it beyond it's the most heinous thing I've ever seen in public life. I'm extraordinarily proud of my colleagues, our offices, who literally have worked every single hour over the past several days to prevent these acts from coming into reality. I want to thank my team, Executive Assistant Attorney General Angela Kai, Sarah Gregory from our Division of Law, Jeremy Feigenbaum, our Solicitor General, Chief Counsel Sandeep Iyer, Director of the Division of Law, Mike Walters, and so many others, as well as our incredible Commissioner of our Department of Human Services, Sarah Edelman, and her team, who have been motivated by one thing and one thing only, which is to make sure food gets on the table of vulnerable Americans. Last night, as I fed my own kids, I was on a conference call about this very issue. And I almost got brought to tears thinking about the parents in my shoes who were not as lucky as I am, who were wondering whether they'd wake up tomorrow and whether some court or whether their government would deprive them of the right that we all as parents wake up every day thinking about. And so I hope this lawsuit sends a message. We're going to win. But I hope people in Washington and across this country who did not have the courage to do what we've done say there are things that are still outside of the bounds of political debate. And the food that goes on the table to feed our kids, our seniors, those who are suffering from disabilities, and ordinary Americans who serve as the backbone of our economy should not be used as a political pawn ever again, period.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Crystal Fitzsimons with the Food Research and Action Center, FRAC. We're a national anti-hunger organization that focuses on ending hunger in the United States. And I want to start by saying how grateful I am to the attorney generals on this call and who brought the lawsuit. It really should not have come to this. I've been working at FRAC for 26 years and they have never stopped SNAP benefits. It's unprecedented. USDA had the funding to provide those benefits. They chose not to. They had funding through contingency funds. They had funding through the child nutrition account. And there was absolutely no reason for them not to provide the SNAP benefits. The Trump administration even did it in the last shutdown when they were in power. SNAP is the largest and most effective nutrition program we have in this country that really helps keep hunger at bay for 42 million Americans, kids, older adults, seniors, people with disabilities, and also veterans. I think on the eve of Veterans Day, we should also remember the fact that over 1 million veterans actually participate in SNAP. SNAP reduces hunger, it improves health, it reduces poverty, it supports kids' education. It's really a litany of benefits that SNAP provides. And for every one meal the emergency food system provides, which is very important, SNAP provides 9. There's no way for states or localities or nonprofits or communities to really fill that gap. We need the SNAP program to be operating, providing the benefits that families need to put hunger at bay. We all saw the crisis unfold. The last 10 days have been horrific to watch what's happened as families have really struggled with the chaos and states have really worked to try and alleviate that. But it's really been heartening, those efforts. But looking ahead, we need to make sure that the SNAP program is available to everyone who needs it, that there is not being used as a bargaining chip. And looking ahead as well, Congress and the administration actually cut the SNAP program by $186 billion in the budget reconciliation that they passed last summer. And the only thing that I am hoping that comes out of this, in addition to the families receiving the benefits that they need to put food on the table, is that people remember how important the SNAP program is and that Congress actually considers reversing those cuts, because we know that millions of families, once we get through this crisis and we get families the benefits that they are eligible for, some families are going to lose benefits or lose all of their benefits, and we need to make sure that that's reversed. So I just want to close by thanking the AGs. Your leadership is so important, and this program is just so critical to the millions of people across the country who participate in it. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Rachel Sebelius with No Kid Hungry.
Thank you, Crystal. And thank you to all the attorney generals for your hard work in hosting this today. My name is Rachel Sabella, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the director of No Kid Hungry New York, a national campaign working to end childhood hunger and poverty. When I joined the anti-hunger community more than 10 years ago, the first and most important lesson we were taught is that SNAP is the first line of defense against hunger. Full stop. That's what everyone needs to remember. So the challenges around SNAP have been even more devastating for families in every corner of the country, and especially right here in New York State. More than 14 million children across the country receive SNAP benefits each month, and the shutdown meant they lost access to those nutritious meals. SNAP recipients can't cut back any further. They were already struggling to afford groceries for their families. And even before the shutdown, our research showed that 1 in 3 parents living on low incomes worried about running out of food. What did that mean? They skipped meals. They made their portions smaller. We had parents tell us they were hiding food in the closet because they wanted to make sure that there were meals at the end of the month for their families. They needed to stretch their allotments and ensure they had a food supply. I'm a very proud, lifelong New Yorker. New Yorkers stand up for each other, especially in times of crisis. When New York State provided free meals to all students, when New York increased funding for food pantries and soup kitchens, it was done in a bipartisan manner. And as my fellow New Yorker and Attorney General James stated, it was because hunger is a moral issue and not a political one. And now we need the federal government to come together as New York has done and do the same. And now I want to speak directly to SNAP recipients. This has been a confusing, very scary time, and information is constantly changing. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. We know that the first New Yorkers were expected to receive benefits on Sunday. They did receive them and they have been able to spend them. We expect more households to continue to get their benefits, both in New York and across the country. We want you to go to the stores, go to the local businesses, spend those dollars and put food on the table for your families. Again, there's misinformation out there, so check with your state agencies to learn more about the status of benefits. And if your benefits are denied, call your Attorney General's office. We're here to support you and make sure everyone has access to those benefits. And now I'm so pleased to introduce my longtime collaborator, Jilly Stevens, CEO of City Harvest.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I would also like to add my thanks to the attorneys generals who've been involved in this effort. City Harvest is based in New York City, and this is the 5 boroughs of New York is the focus of our work. The confusion sown over the last few days really signals a remarkable indifference to the plight of the people that we're all here to serve. I want to thank Attorney General James, though, for bringing to life the reality for so many of SNAP users. Those were really important stories for us to hear, and we're all having the same conversations every day with the people that we're serving. I'll focus my remarks on New York City, where we see 1.8 million New Yorkers who receive the SNAP benefit, who rely on that critical lifeline. It's not an extreme thing to say that it is a lifeline for so many people, and to go for so many days without that SNAP benefit really wreaks a terrible toll on those neighbors of ours. We're seeing very long lines for food at food pantries. We're hearing from food pantries who are running out of food, having to turn people away. And as we heard earlier, a lot of this is hitting children the hardest. So it's critical that these SNAP benefits flow. I'm grateful to the leaders in New York State that they're flowing in New York State. They have to flow across the country for every American. And also, as we've just heard from Rachel, SNAP is a really important economic driver. Here in New York City, we know that for every dollar in SNAP benefits that's paid, we'll generate about $1.50 in economic activity. And across the state, that translates to about $12 billion. An economic activity. And the minute SNAP stops flowing, the impact of that not coming into the economy locally is felt immediately by those farmers, retailers, bodega owners, and so on. So again, I want to echo the thanks we've already heard. The effort being put forth is tremendous, and we're incredibly grateful for it, and I hope we see an end to this soon. And with that, I'll turn over to Attorney General. I'll turn back to Attorney General Bonta.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and for your amazing statements. We're happy to take any questions. Bethany, do you want to lead?
Yes, and we have a lot coming in already. If you'd like to ask a question, you may do so by raising your hand using the raised hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or you can submit questions through the Q&A feature. First one, hi there, this is the Philadelphia Inquirer. Attorney General Platkin, given the granting of the temporary restraining order, is New Jersey still continuing to issue these full benefit payments to SNAP recipients, or is New Jersey following USDA's order to claw these payments back until an official court ruling is made? Thank you.
No, we are continuing to use or to honor full payments for our SNAP recipients. The letter, again, that was sent on Saturday evening with no explanation has been stayed by the district court, as my colleagues mentioned. So that letter has no effect as we stand here. There was a hearing this afternoon on our temporary restraining order application, but the upshot for New Jerseyans is the full benefits of SNAP remain on their cards as it has since Friday.
Next question comes from WCCO TV. You are now unmuted. You have to unmute yourself as well. Okay, we will come back. Next question. Can someone comment on how it will impact the ongoing lawsuits if the government reopens in the next few days, from USA Today?
I can take a crack at that. We're monitoring a number of things right now. Certainly the proposal by the Senate to reopen the government, which I'm very disappointed with, and has allowed the possibility of ripping away of subsidies for affordable health care to continue into the future. But we'll see what votes are if it's finalized, and then we'll have to identify how it impacts our case. But it could be that going forward there is full funding of SNAP benefits. That could be part of the deal, but we don't know until the deal gets finalized. So we'll watch that. We're also, as mentioned, continuing to monitor the court's ruling on the temporary restraining order that we have today, where we're challenging the ability of USDA to require states to undo or reverse the full funding of benefits that the District of Rhode Island ordered. And then we're also going to see what the federal government will do at the U.S. Supreme Court with respect to potentially moving to extend the stay of the District of Rhode Island's order. So a lot of moving parts right now, but if there is a final agreement to reopen the government, there definitely could be impact on this case. But we want to see this case through to the end, making sure that as soon as possible, every single eligible SNAP beneficiary receives the food that they need.
Under this deal, there is no guarantee that we will be able to protect 1.6 million New Yorkers' health care. And that is what this shutdown was all about. And it's unfortunate that we cannot depend and or trust our federal government. There is a possibility that these cases might be mooted as a result of this deal. But at the end of the day, this administration is seeking to claw back benefits from states and or from some of these vendors. And so there is still an open question, and that is why we have stepped up and we are seeking a TRO, because there is no way that they can legally claw back these benefits that rightfully belong to our respective constituents.
So I'll just agree with my colleagues, but I'll add one thing. This is Keith Ellison. There's an important legal principle here. Can the federal government, can the U.S. Department of Agriculture or the Trump administration just say, when there are benefits that have been argued in Congress and appropriated and allocated for a certain purpose, which is to meet the needs of hungry Americans, can they arbitrarily and capriciously just say, you can't have that? That's really, we need to solve that problem right now, because that is really at work in so many of the cases that we have had to file. The administration just sort of ignoring the will of Congress and all of the people they represent.
Thank you. Next question comes from the Minnesota Star Tribune. Attorney General Ellison, I know the state has begun issuing SNAP benefits over the weekend. Has the funding been distributed to all Minnesota recipients, or is that still ongoing? Are there additional rounds of benefit payments that could be affected by the ongoing court cases?
My understanding from my staff, as I've been briefed, is that the money is flowing. And that's the information that I have received. So I think the answer is yes. That's how I've been advised.
This is from CNN. Is it your understanding that today's hearing will also cover your request for a TRO made in your reply brief from last week that would compel the administration to cover full SNAP payments, or just the fight over the guidance from this weekend?
I'm happy to jump in here. The TRO that we filed last night, so there's two separate cases. The First Circuit has already ruled that the federal government both violated a restraining order, violated the court's order, in the Rhode Island case, and substantively had to pay full benefits. So we believe the court in Massachusetts is bound by that decision. The TRO that we are filed last night raises those issues, but also more seeks to prevent the federal government from implementing that Saturday night letter, that insane letter that sought to penalize us for following their own guidance about paying our residents for their food. So there's two separate issues, but the First Circuit, because there's two cases, the First Circuit Court of Appeals has already ruled that the federal government has to pay full benefits. And then the federal government, for reasons that I defer to them to try to explain, is now, notwithstanding the fact that the shutdown is apparently coming to an end, still seeking to go to the Supreme Court on that order. So it's a little complicated, but the main thing is we are still seeking to prevent them from trying to penalize states separate and apart from the first lawsuit for doing our jobs pursuant to their own guidance.
And that First Circuit case, which was filed by Democracy Forward and will now be heard by the United States Supreme Court, there is no hearing as of yet. It is currently being briefed.
Next question is for Jilly from USA Today. Can you speak to how food pantries will recover from the surge in users? How long will it take? What will be required?
It's going to look different from pantry to pantry and city and community to community. I can say in New York City, what we're doing at City Harvest is we are surging much more food to the pantries. We've identified the neighborhoods in New York City that have the highest rates of SNAP enrollment. We've identified pantries within those neighborhoods and agreed with them that we're bringing much more food. In November, we'll bring 1 million more pounds of food than we had planned to bring. And, to the degree we can expand that circle to other communities, we will. But it's something that the community will continue to reel from. It'll take a while to recover.
This is from KQED for AG Bonta. What advice would you give to CalFresh recipients right now who are anxious they may be asked to give their November benefits back and be reluctant to spend any EBT funds they have received last week?
So I would first say that we are fighting tooth and nail as attorneys general to make sure that there is no undoing or reversing of the benefits that our eligible recipients in our states have received. That's what we're going to court on today in a couple hours to argue on this temporary restraining order. We feel that we will prevail. We won't know until the court decides, but we're fighting for you is item number one. Item number two is in California, nearly all, the vast majority of the 5.5 million eligible SNAP beneficiaries have received full funding. And that was done in compliance with the law and the direction of USDA. I can't imagine any world that is decent, that is dignified, that is humane, that is compassionate, that is American, where a eligible SNAP recipient who has funding on their card and needs that money to feed their hungry family and themselves would be forced to pay that money back. I don't know what a court would order in the future or what this federal government will seek, given their policy of cruelty by design. maybe this isn't off the table to make that request. But I want every SNAP beneficiary to know we are fighting for you tooth and nail to make sure that you can be fed and that there will be no revocation or undoing of the benefits that you have loaded onto your cards.
So this is Keith Ellison. I want to go back to the last question, which asked about the effect on food pantries, and I think City Harvest answered the question very well. But for Minnesota, I have to say that the people who are working at places like Second Harvest are telling us that they need money and volunteers, and that there was pressure on their resources even before this SNAP crisis, artificial SNAP crisis began, and that jobs are slowing. Credit card debt is up, personal bankruptcies are up, prices are up, rents are up, and this couldn't happen at a worse time, and they need more help. But they'll tell you that what they do is, I mean, we call the SNAP program supplemental. Well, the real supplement is from so many of the feeding programs, so many of the programs that step up. SNAP is the way that Americans help feed other Americans, and the food shelves and the others who do such a wonderful job, they can't make up the gap all on their own. But if the members of the Independent Free Press can say that folks need volunteers and donations, I definitely want to make a pitch for that.
This question is from Newsday for Attorney General James. How can New Yorkers complain to the AG's office if retailers won't accept EBT cards?
They can reach out to the Attorney General's office, or they can call us on our hotline at 212-416-808000. We've heard complaints on our hotline already. And again, I want all vendors to know, all retailers to know that they should accept the EBT cards. But if we hear from any constituent, we will respond. We've sent out cease and desist orders based upon the complaints that we received thus far.
Okay, next question comes from Matt. Matt, you are now unmuted.
Hi, everybody. Just a few questions here. I guess the first is that, can anybody speak to the practicalities of how far back these delays have set families financially, materially? How do they make up the shortfalls? The next part would be, what is everybody bracing for next month if this happens again? What kind of aid is needed? And then for the attorneys general, what is the effect of constantly playing catch up against this seemingly endless paper trail of court challenges required just to keep the basic functions of government operating? What are people supposed to think about how much effort, lag time, and obstacles are being thrown in the way of just regular operations?
I think I can step in. I want to go back to something we heard from Attorney General Ellison and just sort of underscore that a little bit, that this was a big issue even before the government shut down, and now this SNAP delay. In New York City in 2019, we saw 25 million visits to food pantries. Last year, we saw 47 million visits to food pantries. So people are already struggling, and this now is layered on top. I would say, it is an incredible setback. The pressure on organizations like City Harvest and other food rescue and food banks across the country is intense at what is always a very busy time of year. We're heading into the holidays. Can you think of a worse time for this to hit our neighbors and our communities as we head into the holidays? We always see increased demand at this time of year as people struggle to pay higher heating bills. Children are hungrier, you need more calories. And so organizations like City Harvest and so many hundreds of thousands of others across the country are pushed just to find ways to do more to meet the needs of our community, to do something so basic as to feed themselves and their children. And I know we'll all do it, but the demands are great.
I just want to add to what Jilly said as well, and ditto everything that she said. But the other thing we're also encouraging families to do is, if you are in a state like New York, like Michigan, like California, where there is free school breakfast and school lunch for families that are struggling right now and the loss of SNAP benefits, make sure that your children are eating those meals. If you have been furloughed as a federal government employee or have lost your job and you're in another state, please put in an application, see if you are eligible for a free or reduced school meal. So that's another way to at least help families stretch their dollars. These are in no way means an ideal situation, but just small ways that we can be helping families. And also, again, I just want to say the work that is being done on the ground right now. We have all seen the lines at soup kitchens and food pantries. We see the seniors online with their canes. We see families there with children. They are doing the work. They need the volunteers and they need the funding. So to get the word out to support them, again, as we're going into the holiday season, as we're going into colder weather, when heating costs are going up and families are going to need additional support to deal with this affordability crisis.
You mentioned what's coming, let me mention home heating assistance. I'm from Minnesota, and we are a cold weather state, as are several others. And Donald Trump has absolutely taken steps to cut or reduce low-income home energy assistance program, LIHEAP, and other federal heating assistance programs during his presidency. His administration has repeatedly proposed to eliminate LIHEAP entirely in budget plans, including the current fiscal year. Despite bipartisan Republicans and Democrats saying that that's not going to work. And also, this April, the administration fired the entire health HHS LIHEAP team, resulting in delayed or frozen release of funds to states, leaving millions in uncertainty. So, yes, Congress ultimately provided emergency stopgap appropriations a few months ago regarding LIHEAP, but we expect that we've seen so many programs that we expect should be followed and funded, as Congress has decided, that I actually will speak for myself, stay up worried about home heating assistance as the snow starts to blow in Minnesota, as it is doing actually right now.
We are witnessing the restructuring of government through the illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional executive orders. We are seeing power amassed in the hands of the executives. We are witnessing a callous and cruel and chaotic government. It's not only this program, it's all of the other programs where we, as Democratic attorneys general, have stepped up to defend Head Start, to defend cuts towards our law enforcement agencies, to defend cuts against victims of domestic violence and sexual assaults, to protect Head Start, to protect all of these rifts, these reductions in force, which primarily and disproportionately affect women of color. And the list goes on and on and on. And that's why it's so critically important that we organize. It's so really critically important that we stay shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm against any harms to our respective constituents. And that's why we are here today, to basically protect children from hunger, to protect them from this, the cruelty that we are witnessing, these hunger games, and using children and families and veterans as political pawns. It's disgraceful. And it's so critically important that we stand and support immigrants who are being disappeared each and every night, disappeared by masked agents. And that's why it's an honor and a privilege to work with all of my Democratic attorneys general who understand and recognize the rule of law and the constitutional order that we have a responsibility and a duty to defend. And that's what we do, even if it requires us sacrificing time with our families and sleep. But at the end of the day, I think our democracy is our number one priority, saving our democracy and saving our country.
I agree with everything that my colleagues have said. I would just note one additional harm. We laid this out in our case that we filed, or the papers we filed last night. In addition to the immediate horrors that people are potentially experiencing as a result of these heinous decisions being made in Washington, there's also mass confusion and an attempt to undermine the confidence people have in these systems as a whole. These systems exist to ensure that people have food and that they feel confident. And what we've heard in New Jersey, and I'm sure elsewhere, is that people are making life decisions about what they pay for and what they don't pay for because they're simply not sure whether this food assistance will be there. Look, I think we all know keeping our families from starving would trump any other consideration. And so when people fear that that assistance will go away, even in the face of a government telling them that they should be assured, they make other decisions that might be harmful, like not paying for healthcare, like not paying for their housing, like not paying for their electricity. Those are all decisions families are making today because the federal government can't say with a clear voice that they're not going to threaten people's food security. So there's the immediate harms that people have where they might not get the food, but then there's the longer term threat to the confidence people have in these programs, which again, as you've heard, we should be talking about expanding, not cutting. So there's short and long-term harms here that this federal government has unleashed as a result of being the first federal government in the history of the program, as you've heard, to jeopardize SNAP.
Yeah, I want to put just I want to level set and double click on this idea of the basic functionings of government not occurring. That was done by choice by this federal administration. This was a decision. It was something that was a strategy, and it was deliberate and it was intentional. They decided to not pay SNAP benefits for the first time in the history of our country and the existence of the SNAP program because of malice and animus and cruelty to try to politically leverage Democrats. And it had never been done before. During shutdowns, even in Trump's 2019 shutdown, the payments were made and the hungry were fed. The law requires them to make the payments. They have the funding, both in the contingency fund and in other funds, to pay not just partial, but full benefits. They said they were going to pay during the shutdown and then deleted that statement from the website. So they have worked overtime. They have gone out of their way. They have really dug deep and stretched and reached to not feed hungry Americans, even though the law requires it. They have the funding and they know they have to do it because they've said they've had to do it. So this idea that there's some neutral reason for the government's basic functionings not occurring is not true. This is a decision by the Trump administration. They really went out of their way to make this happen and to deliver this cruelty and to deprive Americans of all backgrounds, Republicans and Democrats, but all who are vulnerable, who we should all care for and love and support, our seniors and our children and our veterans and the disabled, to deprive them of food. So I just want to level set when we talk about the basic functioning of government. This is a government that has chose not to allow for the basic functionings of government.
Thank you. Next question comes from Jacob. You are now unmuted.
Folks, this is Jacob with Scripps News. Thanks so much for doing this. One sort of legal technical question and then one political question. For the attorneys general, I take your point that you're quite confident in your legal argument and the need for the administration to release these full funds. But we have also seen the Supreme Court with this conservative majority sort of rule contrary to how many experts might have expected previously. Functionally, how would it work if this court does order you to claw back some of the SNAP funding that's already been appropriated? Are you capable of removing funding from individuals' EBT cards, or is that something that the states would have to make up that funding? How would that work sort of logistically? And then on the political question, and this is both for the attorney generals as well as for some of the advocates here, you spoke about sort of your frustration with the deal to reopen the government and vis-a-vis healthcare and the concerns about the ACA subsidies. I'm wondering if you could speak to the SNAP factor in all of this. We've heard from some advocates who feel like the White House was really using SNAP as a leverage to push Democrats to support a reopening measure. it seems to be effective. They got enough Democrats, at least in the Senate, to vote for this. So what message does it send both perhaps to this administration about the ways that they can utilize levers of power, but also to the American people about these Democrats who are voting to open the government in the face of what this administration has done with SNAP?
So first, let me begin that a single cost to New York State of SNAP payments is around $650 million. New York State is not in a position, obviously, to afford that. It's also important to understand that there is another set of funds, Title 32, which basically pays for the Children Nutrition Program, or WIC, Women and Children. And basically, the administration was arguing that you're basically, in order to pay for SNAP, you would have to deplete funds from the Child Nutrition Fund, which is just not true because there's sufficient funds in that account. I think it's really critically important that individuals understand that no state in the union is in a position to pay for the payments that have gone out to our constituents. And two, I believe that not only was SNAP being used as a political pawn, but also, unfortunately, all of the delays at our airports were also being used as a political pawn as well. And that's why you had a cadre of Democrats who decided to cede power. But at the end of the day, I don't see how you can trust this administration. Again, I think it's really critically important that here in the state of New York that I stand up for the 1.6 million individuals who depend upon health care, Obamacare, and who will see their premiums, if not double and triple and or quadruple. And I think it's really critically important that we stand together and urge the Supreme Court to follow precedent and to recognize the damage that the USDA and this administration has done to this country and to our respective states.
I'll just add that the Trump administration's position was, we are going to starve hungry Americans until you allow us to rip away affordable health care from other Americans. And that is not a choice. And the Democrats who agreed to under those threats, I think, caved, and they shouldn't have. And I'm very disappointed. I'll leave it at that. To your first question, we don't control what EBT vendors do, and they have their own independence and abilities. I think that the request to undo the full funding of SNAP benefits in the states that have done that, or mostly done that, is unlawful and unreasonable, and we'll be in court continuing to make that argument, which we are already so far prevailing on. And I don't even know if it's logistically possible and how it's supposed to work. So to your question, I don't know that it is doable.
Thanks for the question. We laid out in our papers how technologically impractical, if not impossible, it would be to do that. Again, the files with full benefit payments in many states, including New Jersey, were transferred on Friday as a result of two things: a court order and then subsequent guidance from the federal government to do exactly what we did. Then they came to us on Saturday and said, with no explanation of how to do it, essentially unwind the thing that we told you to do yesterday. These are huge systems. They are not easy to manipulate in that way. And the way they've been sort of issuing these guidance documents, I don't know if they have some intern in high school issuing them, but it's clearly nobody who's ever worked with these systems in Washington. So there isn't a good way to do what they're doing, which is why what we did is go to court and say what they've done is illegal and would jeopardize the food security of millions and millions of Americans. On the second point, I don't have much to add other than that this group of attorneys general have been fighting for the rule of law and for our residents since January. We've been fighting over the past several days and weeks to prevent this government from using people's hunger as a political tool. I don't understand what you go to Congress for if it's not to fight to drive down these costs and protect our residents when they're being used as political pawns. So I certainly wouldn't have agreed with that deal. And I don't know there's certainly no members of our delegation who are standing out strongly and saying they would on the Democratic side. So I'm deeply disappointed in it.
If I could just follow up really quick to Attorney General James, because you're in New York, do you have thoughts about Leader Schumer's role in this and sort of how he's been navigating the Senate Democratic Caucus?
Senator Schumer, from my understanding, has opposed this plan and this deal, and I support his position because, again, we cannot rely upon this federal government. We here, the attorneys general who are here and those who have supported our position recognize that it's really critically important that we get a court order preventing this administration from, again, withholding and or reversing food assistance that family relies upon. There is in the legal community a theory known as the reliance theory, and we relied upon their guidance, and their guidance indicated to us that we could go forward and provide full benefits, and that's exactly what we did. And now they cannot claw back or reverse their decision to provide food to families who need it.
Next question comes from KPFA. How have the recent challenges from SNAP funding standoff during the government shutdown to politically targeted lawsuits and other forms of retribution against perceived opponents shaped how your offices are preparing for the next few years of the Trump administration?
So, can I just say, as someone who has been the subject of the weaponization of this government, that we will continue to do our jobs each and every day. We will coalesce, we will stand together, and we will protect our respective constituents from harm, and we will follow the law. That's what we have been doing, and that's what we will continue to do during the next 3 years of this administration.
Can I just point out that in Project 2025, I mean, we've known that they wanted to attack the SNAP program and many other programs. I mean, in those 900 pages, we were talking about this stuff last March 2024, asking ourselves how to be prepared in a moment like this. So yeah, we're in it for the long run to stand up for the rule of law and American democracy, and that includes the lawful allotment of money, food, and resources by Congress to the people of this country. And we're in it for the long game. So we'll be here today, tomorrow, 2 years from now, fighting for American democracy and the rule of law and the people.
Next question comes from Ruth, Bay City News. Can AG Bonta speak about the impact SNAP insecurities have on California farmers?
I can just broadly say that the Trump administration's deliberate refusal to pay SNAP benefits according to the law and benefits that they had the funds to pay are hurting the whole ecosystem that rely on the SNAP benefits, the providers of the food, the retailers, the farmers. It certainly hurts our most vulnerable first and worst, but it hurts the whole ecosystem that relies on the billions of dollars of SNAP benefits that usually flow into all of our states, including our farmers.
Excuse me, friends. I unfortunately have a 1 o'clock I have to go to, but let me say thank you to my colleagues. Thank you to all of the great folks at No Hungry Kids, City Harvest, Food Research Action Center. And on behalf of the people in Minnesota who do the work you do, thank you so much. And let me just say thank you to whoever mentioned our veterans, tomorrow's Veterans Day, and 1.2 million veterans are facing food uncertainty. And that's very sad. But thank you all. We're going to keep fighting.
And maybe I'll just wrap this up today with lots of questions. We're grateful for the interest and the concern. I think the questions are very much a direct result of the confusion and chaos that this Trump administration has caused on this issue. So we appreciate the interest. We appreciate your time. We're happy to do our best to respond individually after this press conference ends from our respective press offices. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your engagement and appreciate